but want to thank you all so much for joining us tonight for our kickoff Zoom training series. For those that don't know me, my name is Ariana. I'm the state chair of the California Young Republicans. We've got a couple of our state board members on tonight, and we've got a couple of attendees from California. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our treasurer, Richard, who can introduce himself, and then he will walk you all through the presentation. Once he's finished presenting, we will stop recording and then we'll move on to Q&A and then do kind of an open discussion to share ideas and thoughts and comments and all of that. So Richard, you can take it away.
Now, would someone be able to tell me if everyone who has RSVP'd is here yet?
Let me look through. We've got Christine and Susanna. So it's 2 of the 4 that are registered. If you want to wait another minute or 2, we can go ahead and do that. That's totally fine as well.
Sure. Another minute or 2 would be good, just to respect everyone's time. We get started. This will be recorded for posterity's sake, so we can just begin. All right. A couple of things that I would like to just emphasize that I think are especially important as we begin this particular training, and that is that most of it is pretty simple once you actually know what to do, but actually figuring out what to do and how to do it can actually be one of the more complicated parts. So in my own professional life, in political committee administration, government ethics, I've incorporated, supervised, done many filings on from everything from the IRS to the California Secretary of State, the California Attorney General, for political committees, mostly 501c4s, with the intention of being able to keep us compliant. The stakes were, of course, very high for some of the clients that I have had, given that they're very high profile, usually on high profile issues, trying to influence elections through electioneering, which could be in the tens of millions of dollars, if not more. However, I think there is we can probably take umbrage in the fact that many of the requirements that we're talking about here, while important, are also easy to remedy if for some reason we missed a deadline or filed incorrectly. I have found that many agencies, even here in California, are actually very willing to help us come into compliance as well. The most important thing is, one, to be consistent and proactive on your filings. And the best way to do that is to calendar it, because these are very much deadline driven. And quite simply, because of our income thresholds, they're also quite simple. All right. we're going to start first with the incorporation of our chapters. One of the things that I think most is important here is that we can't move forward with any of the other things, at least in terms of government filings, until we've actually incorporated with the California Secretary of State. We are, of course, organization is based in California, so we need to actually start there. And from there, we'll move on to what we need to do with the IRS, other SOS filings, yearly filings, let's say ongoing filings, how we can open up the bank accounts, things of that nature. But it all starts with incorporating. That is me. All right. A very and direct way, and I've helped North Valley with this directly. And of course, it goes without saying that any of you can contact me at any time for the sake of being able to walk you through this. I walked through it with Gary and Jose with North Valley. We were able to finish it in about 10 or 15 minutes. Not a very hard thing to do. BizFile Online, of which you can see the website here, probably makes it the easiest. Rather than downloading a form, you can now do it online. When SFYR, San Francisco Young Republicans, rechartered in 2020, and I was reincorporated at Joseph, our statewide secretary, and myself, the Secretary of State at the time actually required you to mail in a copy, download the forms, which are all available online, but actually physically file a copy or fax it. Now all that can be done online, and this portal, which opened in 2022, is very, very, very easy to do. One of the things that I think is most important is actually selecting your name. And you will find that so many legacy organizations are here. There may well be, and I found 3 different, including ourselves, San Francisco Young Republicans, and they're going back to the 40s. And it was the Republicans, Young Republicans of San Francisco, that was a name. And then there was another name in there too from the 60s. And then, of course, San Francisco Young Republicans, which was what we rechartered in 2020 and incorporated. Unfortunately, it's a lot easier to actually just start and recharter with, reincorporate with a new name instead of actually trying to get the legacy name, even if that legacy name might be our preference. In our case, it worked out, but that's unfortunately one of the things here. If it's already in the system, even if it's been inactive for decades, it's going to be very hard for you to actually use that name. So you have to think of some alternatives. I noted here, and California Young Republicans and San Francisco Young Republicans, of course, downloading the filings is incredibly important. A lot of them are public access, so keep in mind that when you list your officers, anyone that can go on this website anywhere can look up the name of the officers that you're incorporating with in all of your filings. So wherever your chair is, that will have to be listed. Whomever your treasurer of record is will be the signatory and the point of contact. Important to know that there may be some sensitivities in certain professions. I know San Francisco, with those involved in high tech, have had some reticence to have their name publicly released. Just be aware of that. And I would say the rule of thumb is disclose everything that's required to be disclosed, but you don't need to disclose any more of it, which is to say, if you have to list a treasurer, list a treasurer. If you have to list a chair, list a chair, but don't list anything else. And that's probably somewhat there'll be lines for list the entire names of your board. Okay, well, you don't have to do that. Let's not give the government any more information than we need to. All right, this is how this is what I was talking about. A very easy search portal. Type in the name of the organization that you'd like to use, and then we can move on from there. Once you've actually determined that the name no longer is not otherwise used or has been used or is used by another organization, then you could actually choose what type of nonprofit filing organization you're going to be. These are all 501c4s, of which you are definitely going to be. However, and this is under nonprofit corporations' initial filings. I want you to just pay special attention to this. When you file with the California Secretary of State, do not make the mistake that California Young Republicans did and that San Francisco Young Republicans, even though I do this for a living, I made this mistake. And it ended up being a real hassle with the IRS when I had to go back and remedy it in 2022, especially because this is how I know that the portal came online in 2022. Their services were not available for 3 or 4 months, and the IRS gave us very strict deadlines. So it was a real hassle to do that. You have to choose public benefit. Whoever incorporated California Young Republicans That is to say, our organization, our statewide organization, chose mutual benefit. Whoever, and that was me, Incorporated Stafford Superior Republicans also chose mutual benefit. I made that mistake. Some predecessor of mine at that point made a mistake. To remedy it is so much harder, and to actually write to the IRS and include your board meeting minutes and that there was a vote of the board to prove that there was a vote of the board, an attestation or resolution from your secretary showing the board meeting minutes that you did take this vote. It's going to be very challenging. So I cannot emphasize enough. Please do not make the mistake. It's a very common mistake. Like I said, I'm a professional in this, and I made the mistake. The IRS representative that I sorted this out with when we were looking for a nonprofit exemption application said this is a common mistake all the time too. So I cannot emphasize enough. It's public benefit corporation. I just worked with North Valley again just yesterday. I was emailing with their treasurer. The California Secretary of State will issue you, and you should request this via mail as well, and there may be a small filing fee. But it's incredibly important to actually have your incorporation paper stamped with the Secretary of State's seal. That is what's going to allow you to apply for an EIN, because it essentially proves that you exist. Now, the employer ID number or taxpayer ID number, it's essentially the same thing, and that's the number the IRS gives you to identify yourself as an organization. Think of a social security number for an individual, and that's what we are for businesses, for nonprofit organizations, churches, whatever. And that's going to be what's commonly referred to as an EIN or TIN. All right. The IRS website, which I have here, also makes it pretty easy. I'm just going to point out the fact that when you do this and you actually receive your TIN, it's really a very quick turnaround process. They will mail you a certified form, which is the official form. So you have to have the physical address to be able to get it. And important to note that that should be scanned, emailed to however many number of people need it, because the IRS will never reissue it to you again. You will only be issued this number once. You can go back and try and look up what the number is, but you will never be able to go back into the IRS and say, what was our TIN number again? Well, no, that doesn't work that way. You'd have to go through other means to do it. They will never actually mail it to you again. So I would very much suggest that you make multiple copies of this, put it in a vault, and let a bunch of people know where it is, especially with the turnover in YR organizations. It'd be a great help to your organization's staying power and to whomever your successors are as treasurers or board members, for them to actually know what your EIN number is and to have the official issuing letter from the IRS. The application is very easy. Basically, what you have to do is just submit the SOS form, articles of incorporation, and the IRS will usually issue it to you on the spot. All right, so now that you've got proof that you exist, this in essence is your birth certificate. That's your articles of incorporation, and you got your social security number. If you were a person, you got your TIN or your EIN. That just essentially is what is required for us as individuals, for any of us that go and open a bank account. We have to bring our birth certificate. Usually we have to bring an ID, of course. And then we have to bring or provide our social security number. Same thing here. We are able to provide an IRS issued taxpayer ID number. And also we need to show physically the articles of incorporation as stamped by the IRS, by the SOS. So I put that here. There are a couple of tips, and actually these I found out just by virtue of experience going through this with YRs, and of course a couple of mistakes on my end, as we always do. A couple of trips to the bank when I needed the right or going to wrong banks, or finally being told we needed to go to a credit union. Usually the issue was in my own profession, in my day job. There was just these organizations, again, they're higher stakes. They have so much money that they can avoid things like fees because they make an initial wire deposit of however much money. So that's usually not an issue. We have a much lower threshold, so this is going to be quite an issue in terms of being able to find a bank that best suits our needs as a nonprofit organization, with probably lower thresholds than what they would be used to looking at for business checking. And it's usually always going to be under business checking for nonprofits. So the tip number one is go to a credit union. Credit unions usually are, of course, citizen they're consumer owned banks or treasury deposits. Essentially, they don't have the same requirements that a bank would. That is to say, you have to have a monthly direct deposit as you might in your own personal checking account, or keep your reserves at a certain threshold in order to be able to have checking privileges. Usually that allows you to start doing transactions before you actually build up your chapter's treasury and bank account. Tip number 2, and we're finding this out as well, as a matter of just good governance and good practices, and of course transparency, because we are a nonprofit, because we're essentially all donors to these chapters, is to have 2 signature checks with 2 signature lines. It's not necessarily a requirement for nonprofits or by any bank for that matter, but it's a very good practice to have. And that way we know that no one is single-handedly authorizing expenditures. Hopefully your board is authorizing expenditures before they're made, if they're over a certain threshold. But when that person wants to be reimbursed or needs to make a payment on behalf of your chapter, 2 signature lines is usually the best. However, sometimes one of those people may not always be there. So to avoid having to pre-sign a check, might be good to have at least 3 signers, board members that can also sign. When someone cycles off the board, it actually is important for you to remove them, which can be a hassle, but it's important to have board members, and I would suggest more than 2. And one of the things that I discovered working as treasurer for Joseph Bleckman's from San Francisco, his secretary, his central committee run, was that Bank of San Francisco and a few other local banks offer the opportunity for there to be a master account and then to have sub-accounts. Now, what this allows us to do in this case, and because our reserves aren't where we need them to be, we haven't been able to act on it quite yet at a state level, but we would then open an account, CYRF, and have different sub-accounts for the chapters. You would maintain full control of your chapter's accounts. This is a suggestion. It is something that we're planning on offering, not requiring, of course. Everything would be under your own control, your local control. Your funds are your funds. However, what it would prevent are 2 things. 1, turnover in your chapter goes defunct, people move away, and what happens is no one knows how to access previous funds when they want to restart the chapter. In essence, this allows for a lot of money to just slip through the cracks, and eventually it's seized by the state. And as California Young Republicans have even found on the statewide level, the state will hold a lot of this unclaimed property in trust for the organization until someone goes and claims it. Could take up to 6 months for you to recover it, and you have to go through a lot of trouble. One of the ways to do that is, since there's larger staying power in the statewide organization, is whenever their chapter might go defunct, we're always going to know where the money is. We're always going to be able to have access to it. We're not going to manage it, but this would prevent the situation which a lot of chapters have gone to. And I think it's a wonderful idea. Once we're able to implement it, we will, of course, let the chapters know. All right. So this is incredibly important as well. Like I said, it's incredibly simple disclosures. The disclosures are nothing, they're not brain science. If you're keeping a ledger of your expenditures, a balance book, you basically do not have to have very many issues with trying to figure out where your money went. And to be quite honest, many of our expenditures are probably under $20,000. So it's not hard to know and the expenditures are probably going to be in broad categories, going to be the same thing. They're going to be banking transaction fees. They're going to be event fees. They're going to be what have you. There might even be development fees, fees that you use that are paid toward fundraising. And you can designate those, know what you're actually, refer to your budgets and to your ledgers, and then you have to report that to the California Attorney General. This is point number 2. Point number 1 is from the Secretary of State's office. You have to file what's called a statement of information every 2 years. So that's on the 2-year anniversary of your incorporation, and then every 2 years. And that is basically to update them, show them you're still in existence. If you don't, they could suspend you. You have to pay a small fee. I think it's like $25, at least the last time I checked. And you will have to just list your current list of officers and contact person. And the idea is, we don't have a bunch of nonprofits or organizations out there that aren't active. In fact, we actually have organizations that are active, and we have their current contact and board members. and there's follow-up there. But it's only every 2 years. Best thing to do is, as SFYR does, as CYRF does, is to have a Google Drive and calendar it for whomever the treasurer is at the time, especially because there is so much turnover in officers as well. It's easy to forget. Calendaring it is the best way to do it. The worst thing would be for you to go onto the SOS website or receive a letter saying that the articles of incorporation have been revoked and that you're suspended as an organization. And then, of course, they can proceed to start seizing assets. The initial registration charitable with the California Attorney General, essentially they oversee nonprofits. That is to say, because there is a public interest in seeing where money goes, especially because it's donor funded usually, that the public has an interest in knowing how money is spent, at least broadly, and where that money is coming from. But like I was just saying, if you keep a good ledger and know where the broad categories of what your expenditures are, you can easily tell them how much we had in income, how it came about. That is to say, did we have dinners? Did we just have large donations? Were officer dues the ones responsible for it? That your income, your expenditures might be a little more challenging, but if you've got broad categories in your budget, that works too. And those would actually mirror what occurs in the IRS and what that requires for nonprofit disclosure. I'll get to that in a bit. One of the important things is you have to file the initial registration as soon as you deposit those funds. So if you go to the bank on a Monday and deposit your funds in the bank, when you open your bank account, that first, no matter that first dollar, that first $20 or what have you, first $1,000, the clock starts ticking, and you have I want to say it's 5 business days to at least have a postmarked initial registration. Let's say, where's this money coming from? This is who we are operating. Then anyone who actually wants to be able to look at how you spend your money, perhaps there's a big donors like to do this and see how their money is being spent. Are you a worthy steward of the recipient funds? They can go onto the California website, Attorney General website, Registry of Charitable Trusts, and they will then be able to see your reports, your annual reports, which is number 3. Number 4. Now here's a cautionary tale, and I keep learning things, and this is number 4, Annual Form 990. The 990 is essentially the 1040, but for organizations. So we file 1040s as individuals. Most of us, our personal income tax return every year due April 15th. May 15th are business tax returns, which include nonprofits, and that's called the IRS Form 990. Usually there's a lot of detail, including donor names and expenditure lists, and a look back for 3 or 4 previous tax years. But that's only if the receipts are over $50,000. I don't know of any chapter here that, and I could be wrong, that has over $50,000 in receipts. The good thing is, if it's just under $50,000 of receipts, it can be $49,999.99 for a given year. You just have to actually essentially do what's called a 990N, a postcard. You go on to the IRS's website, and of course I have credentials, which all of us can use to avoid doing this, to avoid having to create new credentials and have the risk of getting lost. We can go on to the IRS website and just say, push a button, I certify for the previous tax year, let's say 2023, we had less than $50,000 in receipts. Receipts, that means income. That's not necessarily a reflection of your expenditures as well. I'm not going to get into the balancing test. There's a 3-year look back. So if, say, 1 year you did have $100,000 in receipts. So, okay, we had to do a long 990 form. But then the other years we had, less than 50,000. You might still be required because you were over 50,000 because they do a 3-year average. And if that average for the 3-year look back is over 50,000, then you still have to file a longer 990. That's not going to be the case for any of us at this point. Maybe one day. So important to do that. I advised at our board retreat in January, February, earlier this year, that the risk is if you don't file for 3 successive years, the IRS actually could end up revoking your EIN number. And I've never actually seen that happen. And I said that. I've never seen that happen. But it could happen. So it's good to get in the process of just doing it every year, going in there, clicking, I had less than 50 grand in receipts. That way you don't forget and 3 years have gone by. Of course, I've never seen the IRS revoke an EIN. However, CYRF, when I went into file our 2023 990 in May, what I found before the May 15th deadline, the IRS gave me an error message saying that our EIN had been revoked. We hadn't filed a 990. It's a hassle. It's not impossible, but it does involve you calling the IRS, telling them who you are, proving who you are, and asserting that you're active as an organization, and then going back and filing for at least the previous year, years since they revoked you to demonstrate that you did not have over 50,000. Just file it every year. Push the darn button. It's the easiest of these. Calendar it. I cannot emphasize that enough because it's happened to CYRF. Point number 5 is actually something really interesting as well. The annual Form 199, the California Franchise Tax Board, for those of you who pay taxes in California, because probably all of us, is our IRS, our state level authority charged with tax collection. And they have essentially an annual a form which is exactly like, and it mirrors this Form 990 from the IRS. If you have less than $50,000 in receipts, then what happens? You just certify that, put your name in case they want to contact you. SFY, our San Francisco Young Republicans, last month got a notice from the FTB saying that we did file the 199 for 2020, the year we incorporated. Now, it is true that the annual Form 199 needs to be filed whether or not you had receipts. So you could have had no income. You still have to file. They do require you to file every year, the state. However, what I did not know is, since we did not collect any money the first year, and this is the case with the 990, so this was my oversight as treasurer at the time, to not file the 2020 199. That was a conscious decision on my part, because I thought, just like the 990, we didn't have any receipts for any years previously. It was the first year we were in operation. So it's very easy to remedy. There's only tax penalty if there's tax due. However, there are lots of fallout and work on the back end if you don't keep up with these filings. So I submitted the form, went back and filed the year 2020 199. So keep in mind, and you should just do them at the same time. Before May 15th, the FTB honors all IRS. They have their calendar, the IRS deadlines. Just file both of them. It'll take you no more than 5 minutes each. Well, those were my closing thoughts. I know it seems like a lot. I'm here to walk you through it. I'm in this position for another year and a half, and even after that, for me, it's nothing for me to get on the phone with any of you, or even log on to the portal like I did for NVYR and give them the credentials and then just walk through them step by step. I'm here for you. If there's any questions, once you actually get the hang of it, get it calendared, have a treasurer that's serious and that is conscientious and that has a mentor. So if you've been doing treasury work for 2 years, as I did in SFYR, and then you hand it off to someone else, as I did when I became chair, of course, mentoring my successor, because these things aren't intuitive. And it's just a really good thing for us to know, especially if we're going to be involved in political organizations, political nonprofits in our careers, or maybe just in our own time in the future. Just make note that you save yourself a lot of work and a lot of headache if you just keep up with the government filing deadlines. And in fact, while we are small potatoes, I will say that there is the opportunity and chance and the hope that we will get bigger in the future. And the ideal would be that we will actually get on people's radar, but we're on people's radar for efficacious electioneering work and work we do as Republicans. There's going to be more scrutiny. So they're going to go back and they're going on these public databases and say, did California Republicans file these forms? Oh, no, they haven't. They're delinquent with the California AG. Well, that's bad press. Suddenly people may not want to take our money and help. So best practices are always good, especially because once you get the hang of them and you keep on top of the deadlines, they're just so easy. So if there's anyone here that has any questions?
Before we move into questions, thank you so much, Richard. Really appreciate all the information you provided to everybody tonight.